International Conference on Transformative Education. We're delighted to invite Dr. Sue Roffey at University College London and Western Sydney Universities. She's a psychologist, academic, a speaker, and author on school and student well-being. Dr. Roffey has developed a pedagogy for social and emotional learning for students and teachers. Today, she'll facilitate our catalytic keynote session, the Aspire Pedagogy for Social Emotional Learning. We invite you to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Sue as she shares her insights and expertise with us.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's a real honour to be here, to be at a conference which has so many themes that are so close to my heart: global citizenship, social emotional learning. I'm going to have to ask the organisers to move my slides along, so if we could have the next one, please. What I'm going to be talking about is what this session will now cover. I'm going to be talking about the importance of SEL, which I'm sure you've heard in many other speakers already. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the what, but much more about the pedagogy, the teaching approach, what we actually need in order to enable young people to learn these skills and conceptions well. And I'll talk about Aspire, what it is and why it matters. Next session, next slide, please. Social emotional learning has the potential to address not only issues for individuals to build healthy relationships, support mental health and well-being and belonging, which of course is a mainstay of resilience. And it's important in these days of conspiracy theories and the non-truth environment to enable young people to become critical thinkers, to be able to appreciate the importance of evidence and what it means. But it goes beyond individual skills. Social emotional learning for me is about how we reduce prejudice and discrimination to increase our shared humanity and knowing how to treat others well as a way of supporting a future healthy society. Michelle, do you have a problem?
Sorry to interrupt. The robotic field is on the mic again. Could we correct it?
I'm not sure how to do that.
You could turn it off and on again to try and restart it.
The speakers. I'm not sure which one press to stop to change the speakers. Do you know which one I'm on the Mac here?
Or the buds.
Take my ear out. Is that better? Does that work better?
Could you restart it?
Does that work better? Can you hear me now?
The problem is still there.
You can't hear me at all.
We can't hear you, but there's a robotic issue.
I can't hear you. Sorry, I can't hear you without my earbuds, so slightly problematic. That do this. What is really important is going beyond the content to the implementation, and that's what I want to focus on today. Next slide, please. There have been concerns about implementation for some time. In 2008, a book was published, The Dangerous Rise of Therapeutic Education, which should be on the slide in front of you, written by Professor Eccleston and Dennis Hayes. And they were talking about the fact that social emotional learning was not necessarily a safe place for either teachers or students who are expected to talk about difficult things in their lives, and sometimes that was uncomfortable for everybody, and teachers didn't necessarily have the training or the skills or the time to address some of the things that were revealed within social and emotional learning sessions. The slides are not going forward, so perhaps people can move the slides on to now, if possible, please. That's right. Thank you. And the Aspire pedagogy, which has developed now from both experience and research over many, many years. And it makes sure that it's a solution-focused, strengths-based and safe teaching place for both teachers and students. And this is how it works. If anybody wants to know more about this, alongside a lot of activities that support social and emotional learning, that is found in that book you can see on the screen, Circle Solutions for Student Wellbeing. Next slide, please. ASPIRE is an acronym. It stands for Agency, Safety, Positivity, Inclusion, Respect and Equity. And I'm going to talk now about what all of those mean in practice in social and emotional learning. Next slide, please. There are just 3 simple guidelines. And the first one puts in place some agency, respect, inclusion and equity. Everyone has a turn. What you say matters, so that when you're talking, everyone else listens. And teachers tell me that listening skills really improve when this is happening. There are no put downs. You can't say unkind things. You can say personal positives, but that makes sure that it's safe. And the other thing that puts safety in place is that you don't have to say anything. You can choose to pass. Next slide, please. So I've been listening to the speaker before me, whose name is Betsy Ning, and she was talking about the importance of self-determination. And for me, that is about agency. And it's about not telling students what to think and how to be. So much of what happens in education is didactic. The teachers are the fount of all knowledge. And although there needs to be information given in many subjects, in social and emotional learning, we really need to give students the opportunities to come to their own conclusions about the values and behaviours that they want in their lives and in their futures. So to do that, we present them with discussions, hypotheticals and games that enable them to talk and think about some really important issues. We never discuss incidents in Circle Solutions, which is my framework for social and emotional learning. We only discuss issues. So rather than talking about a problem that occurs, we talk about things like trust and safety and how we deal with things like racism. There's no right or wrong answers. And I'm now going to show you just an example of what that means in practice. Next slide, please. And this is an activity. Students are put into groups of 3 or 4, and they're presented with a scenario. And this scenario is about a little boy who has a red mark all over his face, and he's teased and bullied and made fun of because of this. And he's very unhappy. So what we do is we ask students to think about that scenario, and then they are asked the following questions. Next slide, please. They are asked to think about, what would they feel if they were that child, if they were Isaac? Is it his fault he's different? Do we have to all be the same? What would you want to happen if you were Isaac? So a lot of what we're doing here is not only giving students agency, we're also developing empathy, because we're asking them to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. And then, because I think that social and emotional learning needs to be embedded in what happens all day, every day in classes. It's not and should never be a half an hour once a week or twice a week session. Circle solutions need to be embedded for well-being across a school. So what happens next is that the small groups are asked, what could we do to make sure everyone in this class is treated with kindness? And then they're asked to write 3 sentences to put that into practice. We will. Next slide, please. So the next principle is safety. And it's so important that both teachers and students feel safe when they're talking about things. They never discuss issues, and we keep things in the third person. So we remove as much of the personal as possible. People will talk about things that are about them, but they're never asked to. Okay. And of course, you can pass if you want to. The next slide, please. So this is an example of how you can promote safety. So sometimes students are sitting in a circle and they're asked to complete a sentence. So they're given a sentence stem. So rather that sentence stem being something like, I am happy when, which might be hard for some kids who are having a particularly hard time, we might ask them to finish a sentence stem, happiness is, or a good friend would, or something to cheer someone up might be. If you ask children to finish a sentence beginning with my, such as my friend, they might name a friend, which might be very difficult for those pupils who might not have a good friend in class. We need them to think about what friendship is about and what the qualities of friendship are, rather than actually talking about their personal circumstances. Okay, the next slide, please. The third of the Aspire principles is positivity. Now, you will know from your experiences that many of our young people come to school feeling bad about themselves. They don't feel comfortable or safe with other people, and they do not feel good about the world around them. So it's so important wherever we can to promote positivity. We know, for instance, that when children are full of negative emotions, it's quite hard for them to focus and learn. So promoting positive emotions such as feeling they belong, feeling valued, feeling safe, is an important thing to do within these sessions. So the things that we do in circles is that we focus on solutions. So it's not what we want to get rid of, it's what we want. So instead of talking about bullying, we're talking about how do we make this a safe, friendly and inclusive class? And that's one way of actually stopping people being unkind to each other. The importance of having strengths-based language. People have already talked about the importance of talking in to children in ways that actually make them feel that they've got something to look up to. If you intimate to children that they're, not as good as other people, so there's no competition in circles, that they're not as good or as clever as other people, then that's how they think of themselves. If we give them an idea that they're working towards being responsible, there's things they haven't learned yet, that they are becoming kinder and gentler, then they'll start thinking about themselves like that. We're trying to develop a more positive self concept. And the third thing about positivity is that we know that laughing together brings people together. It produces oxytocin, that wonderful neurotransmitter that enables people to feel closer to each other, more connected with each other. And finding ways to be playful and do things that enable people to have a good laugh together really, really matters. Next slide, please. This is just a little activity to promote positivity. And this is for slightly older students. There are, in the Circle Solutions book, there are activities marked Y, M or S for younger, middle primary or senior students. And this is for older students. And in pairs, students are asked to talk for a minute to each other, maybe a bit longer, but you can say a lot in a minute, about something they've achieved. And they just talk about what they did to achieve that. It could be something that they learned, it'd be something that they made, but something that they're proud of. And the other person sits and notes all the strengths that went into that: determination, hard work, creativity, learning, connecting with others. And then if they have some post-it notes, they can plaster these strengths around somebody, or if they don't, they can just tell them afterwards. And then they swap places, so both people get an opportunity. And quite often people don't realize just how many strengths went into the things that they're doing. And then they start to think about themselves and other people differently. And that makes a big difference to the culture in a class. And at last, eventually, the culture in a school. Next slide, please. The next of the Aspire principles is inclusion. And inclusive belonging is where everybody is welcome. Everyone matters and everybody has a chance of participating. Isaac Prelitsky talks a lot about the importance of mattering, and he says that mattering is when students are not only valued, but they have the opportunity to create value and have the opportunity to participate and make a difference. It's incredibly important for resilience and for so many things that our children need to feel good about the world, to feel that they belong. Next slide, please. But I want to emphasize here the importance of inclusive belonging, because exclusive belonging is basically me and my gang. It's about having closed networks where you keep others out to maintain a sense of superiority. And exclusive belonging is dangerous. It's actually at the root of lots of things that we do not want to see in our society. Racism, homophobia, many other things. You keep people out. So we're talking very much about the importance of inclusion here and what that means. So the next slide, please. What we do in social emotional learning with the Aspire principles is that we break down barriers between people. We mix everybody up all the time so that they are talking with people that they don't normally speak to. They are talking to people outside their usual social circles. And what happens in the research that we've done is that although students resist that at first and they want to stay with their mates, in the end, they really do like getting to know other people. And then we give students activities such as pair shares and paired interviews that enable them to find out more about other people. The more we know about someone, the less easy it is to stereotype them, to be prejudiced against them, when we actually know a bit about their stories. And it's so important, particularly for our more vulnerable students who are quite quickly the more easily marginalized and excluded. So if somebody breaks the guidelines, the first thing we say to them is that we really need to have you in the circle. You belong here, but you have to actually respect other people. So you choose, do you want to stay in the circle and abide by the guidelines, or would you like to take a few moments outside to think about it? Next slide, please. And these are just a couple of activities to promote inclusive belonging. And that's a photograph of a circle happening in Australia when I was working there for quite a long time. Pair shares are finding out what we have in common. And we do things that are really safe to find out, especially to start with. What do we like to eat? What do we hate to eat? What music do we both enjoy? And then paired interviews are where we are finding out about the other person. And you can do some such fun things here. What superpowers would you like to have and why? What's the most you've ever walked in one day? What was your favourite toy when you were 5? And just having conversations, I think that our students very often do not learn to have good interactive conversations. And this is one way of helping them learn to talk with each other face to face. Next slide, please. The fifth principle is respect, and respect is for individuals. It's also for the ideas that they have, so we don't put people down and say they're talking rubbish, and also for their culture. And more than anything else, it's about treating others as we would have them treat us, with consideration, empathy, and dignity. Treating others as we would want to be treated ourselves is in all the main religions in the world. It's also about being reliable and trustworthy. It's not prejudging or jumping to conclusion about somebody else, and honouring our shared humanity. There are so many things that we can do to respect others, not putting them down. Listening to each other is so important. Next slide, please. And I thought you might like to have just one activity to promote respect. And this is about talking about what it actually means and to share definitions. And we give people an acronym poem, and we do it in small groups, about 3 people. And we put the word respect down the side, and then they write a sentence or a few words beginning with that R. So you might have respect is really being lovely to people, or it's E is about equity and equality and encouraging other people. And S is for smiling at people that you don't know. There's lots and lots of different ways of finishing this respect poem, and I've seen dozens of them, and it's just one activity we can do to promote respect. And if you show the next slide, please, this is an activity that was done in a school, and people were just looking at what they thought respect was. And I love that, admiring another person's good deeds, accepting another person's other people's differences. How important is that? Next slide, please. We know about the importance of equality. We know that people need to have things that are not so different from each other. We know that the countries that have the highest levels of well-being have least differences between the haves and have-nots. But this cartoon by my friend and colleague Beth Stanley shows what equality might mean in practice, which is treating everybody exactly the same, having the same expectations for everybody. And as you can see from that cartoon, people are different. And although we might put something in place for one person, if another person doesn't have something that meets their needs, they do not have access to equal opportunities. Next slide, please. So the E in Aspire is for equity, not equality, and that's actually making sure that things are fair and flexible for people. Next slide, please. So what we do is that we make sure that everybody has what they need to contribute if they wish to contribute. We give everybody a turn in all the activities if they want to have that. And importantly, one of the things that we do in circles is that the facilitator, the teacher, joins in with everything the students do. They are in charge of proceedings, but they do not control students. And one of the things that does is that it changes the relationships between teachers and students, because they learn to know more about them. They go first in most activities, so they model what's expected. It really makes a difference, and it puts everybody on the same page, is that we're all learning here. We're all learning how to be and how to live together. Some students need extra support or a different approach to enable their contributions. Translation, a short session, and because most things are about talking and discussing with each other and not about writing, it is much easier for those young people who do not have good academic skills to participate fully. Next slide, please. And this is just a little activity. Oh, I think I've done that. Okay, we can come on to the next one. Thanks. this is just a little activity. A lot of things within social and emotional learning, because they need to be applied in classes every day in every way, this is about something that is proactive, and you're giving small children an activity which shows them about a situation, and that situation is, Tommy's been playing with the bike for a very long time and Abby wants to go and he says no. Is that fair? So children in small groups say, is that fair? And if it isn't fair, what do we need to do to make it fairer? So we ask children to think about fairness from a impersonal point of view. Next slide, please, which is the last one. I know we're coming to the end of this session, but I've rushed through this because of all the technical hiccups that we had at the start. If you want more information about Aspire, there are things on the Growing Great Schools Worldwide website. sue@sueroffey.com is my email. And I am currently, next year, in the middle of next year, there will be 2 books published called Aspire to Wellbeing and Learning for All, the Principles Underpinning Positive Education. And that is a chapter for each of the principles I've been talking about today, because they're not only appropriate for the pedagogy for social and emotional learning to make it a safe, strengths-based, solution-focused place, but also positive relationship and creating a school culture that is fit for the 21st century. And if you want to read more about that, that's also in Creating the World We Want to Live In, which was published in 2021. I was a co-author. We have 6 other authors of that. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry about the hiccups with the technology, but I hope that you've actually learned something about how important it is about how we enable young people to learn those important skills. Thank you all very much for listening. Do we have any questions? If you want more questions, you can always come into email me. I'd be very happy for you to email me.